And welcome, Hoosier fans, to another episode of Doing Work, the first show on the Back Home Network dedicated to covering Indiana women's basketball. Today is our 149th episode, recording on the evening of Wednesday, February 12th, 2025. I'm your host, Kathy Amos, joined tonight by my co-host, Jeff Marlow, and today we will be discussing three Indiana women's game. We'll be talking about first Rutgers with a win there, 60-81 at home. Then the Hoosiers went on the road and lost to Minnesota, 55-66, and then on the road again tonight to lose to Michigan, 70-61. After those three games, that brings the record now to an overall 15-9 and 7-6 in the Big Ten. But tonight we will start our show like we do every show, and that's with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And Jeff, for me, I'm going with the Minnesota game in the second quarter, and this was around the 2:43 mark. And I picked this moment because that's when Shea Chesky hit a three-pointer to give her 1,000th point overall. Now I know she hasn't gotten all 1,000 points in that game, but it's still a huge accomplishment. And we already had two other players this year reach 1,000 points in their career. And Shea has now become the third member of this team to do that. And anytime that you can join that 1,000 point club, I think it's a moment to be celebrated. Unfortunately, it came in a loss to Minnesota. And I'm sure we'll talk about Shea in all three of these games. But for me, that was our Hoosier Proud banner moment for these three games. And our banner moment is brought to you by Home Field Apparel, our presenting sponsor of the Back Home Network, which includes the Simply Call, Crimson Cast, X's and Joe's, and the Dribble Drive. Home Field is constantly releasing new apparel, so you're bound to find anything for you or anyone else in your life that loves great collegiate gear. And not only do you get great quality apparel, but you're supporting an Indiana-based business that has its roots in the Kelley School of Business. So go to homefieldapparel.com and use our promo code HOME23 to get 15% off your first order. Again, that promo code is HOME23 for 15% off, and the website is homefieldapparel.com. Wear one for the team. Okay, so it's been a minute since we had our last podcast. So we are going to have a little bit of news here. And so the first thing is Grace Berger, who was with the Indiana Fever, was waived by them, but she did sign with the Minnesota Lynx. IU right now, before tonight's game anyway, was a 10 seed in the latest bracketology in one of the last four byes. Lauren Betts has already announced that she will return next season. And then Shea Chesky, as I mentioned, scored her 1,000 point when we were at Minnesota. But Jeff, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. What do you have for your Marlow's musing over these three games?
Yeah, I just think that Lauren Betts news I thought was huge for, for a player to stay for another year in school. And obviously that's going to put UCLA right to the top of the preseason poll for next year. I mean, they're going to return a lot of players anyway, but you're looking at maybe one of the best players, if not the best player in America for this year and next year. And so I thought that was huge news for the conference, even though it's not IU specific. It's huge news for the conference and women's basketball. I'm going to go back to the last couple of games, Kathy, for my music. It's just too many people disappearing in the last two games. And partly why we've really struggled. The second quarter tonight was a struggle. I thought, and if it hadn't been for Caroline Striplin and to a certain degree Sydney Parrish in the second half, I'm not sure there would have been much offense for tonight either. Again, I've said this before. Your all-conference forward, Yarden Garzon, cannot disappear in a game, let alone two straight games, essentially. And so that's the concerning thing. That's the concerning thing for me coming out of this three-game stretch is how many of the players who are supposed to be vital to you have disappeared. Shea had a decent game at Minnesota, primarily in the second half, but big chunk of this last stretch, she's disappeared. So I don't know what the answer is. It seems as Lily's gotten into the doghouse here. Her minutes have gone way down. And I get Striplin was playing well tonight. But we seem to get the sense that Lily's somehow worked her way into the doghouse per se. Her minutes have gone down. I thought Lexi Bargesser played well tonight, as for the most part. But then you look at some of her stats, and it's like, again, plus minus is a flawed number. But Lexi was had the second highest minus. She was a -10 tonight. So I just. Again, I thought Lexi played well, so I'm really trying not to get down on her tonight, because I thought, Chloe getting in foul trouble really, made Lexi have to play. But I thought she, especially the first half, she played well. Yeah. But it just, again, there's too many people disappearing for too long of stretches or for entire game stretches for this team right now that we need.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, let's get into some of the details of all three games, Jeff. We'll start with records, and kind of like we talked about before the game, we'll talk both, kind of the flow of the game and talk about notable numbers all at the same time. And since I'm hosting, why don't you go ahead and go first and kick us off? So again, this is the game for everyone listening. We won at home 81-60. So
I did not actually get to see the I didn't actually get to see the game, and I didn't go back and watch it, because after I'd seen the final, I was like, it wasn't much point. But this was a night where they shot the ball well. They were, for one of the few times we've really seen this team kind of play well at home and shot the ball well. If you're watching on the YouTube feed, I've pulled up the notable numbers thing here already, but banner up, so I'm going to kind of stick with that. They hit 15 threes. They shot 54% from three that night. The third quarter was 36 points alone. We didn't score 36 points in the half tonight. We didn't score 36 points in a half at Minnesota. So 36 points in a quarter shows you just how well, when everything's firing and when this team's hitting shots, how well they can play. Now, again, Rutgers is not the best team in the league, but you still got to make the shots. And so I thought the really nice, and I thought, wow, this is it. We're going to kind of run here these last stretch of games, play like that, get some shots. We'll make shots. Again, you're not going to hit 54% of your shots from three every night, but you're going to make shots consistently. You're not going to have to worry about where the offense is coming. And then here we went back, and I'll save it for a little bit, but I've already hit them in my musics. Offense has kind of gone away, especially from certain people.
Yeah, absolutely, Jeff. I mean, for me, really, the story of this game was the third quarter. You kind of mentioned that. We had 36 points in that quarter alone. We were 1 point away from the most points in a quarter ever for the program, which was against Wisconsin in 2019 when they had 37. We ended up scoring, like you mentioned, that quarter more than we did in even actually the first half of that game. Even we were 10 of 13 from the three in that quarter, including we hit 7 in a row. It was just like the entire team couldn't miss. And it kind of started with Shea Chusky a little bit there, but it wasn't really a strong game for her either, though she did hit some threes in that game as well. But overall, that's really what did it for us, I think. So, we ended up shooting 54% from three, which, gosh, I don't know about you, but I would take that anytime on 15 of 28 shooting from just 3-point land alone. That was almost the same as what we had overall of 55% for field goals. So they were really just lighting it up from outside, especially, like I said, that third quarter. So, I mean, really at the end of the day, that was what kind of jumped out. And we did get to see in the fourth quarter, all of our subs got in after the under five timeout, which was great. And then I'm sure when we get into it here in a little bit, we'll talk more about some of the individual players. But those were just kind of some of the things that jumped out to me. We actually still got out rebounded, believe it or not, in that game, 35 to 29. And we had a great number of assists, 24 assists on 29 made baskets. So those are some of the things that kind of jumped out for me in terms of that game and their numbers. But anything else, Jeff, jump out to you? No, you didn't see it, but anything else you want to talk on the Rutgers game?
It doesn't bode well for the bench, though. They were both minus 11 in that under 5 minute stretch. So that score could have been way worse if we leave some people in and keep playing. I mean, it could have been, it ended up being 21. It could have been a 30-point game, And I get, you got to get, we've said before, we need to get more bench depth, but the bench can't go, the bench can't go minus 11 in the last 5 minutes. That's just not acceptable either. The other thing I was going to point out here, you mentioned rebounding. They gave up 14 offensive rebounds to Rutgers. That's not acceptable. You can't give up 14 offensive rebounds to Rutgers. And like you said,
only 3 for us. Yes.
Yeah. Now, granted, we didn't miss as many shots, but still, you
Yeah.
can't give up 14 offensive rebounds. Now that I don't have
The-
anything
the-
else about the Rutgers game.
Yeah, the only other thing I wanted to point out is on the defensive side, we did play some pretty nice defense. We held Rutgers to only 2 of 13 from three-point land, or 15%. So, well, before we leave this game and go on, why don't we go ahead and you want to do our game ball and Hoosier Hustle awards here before we move on?
Might as well take them one at a time.
Yeah,
I kind of went back and forth on this one, so we may end up having to give a half a game ball or ask some of the people in the chat mob or the workaholics here. I went to Shea Chesky here. I went with Shea, 16 points, 5 of 8 overall, 4 of 6 beyond the arc, 2 of 2 at the line, 4 rebounds, 7 assists, and she only had 1 turnover in 30 minutes. So I went there. I was kind of at first kind of thinking Sydney, but Sid didn't have the number of assists and she didn't have the rebound. So I went with Shea here for the player of the game.
Yeah.
Game ball.
I was down to those two as well. Jeff, I actually landed on Sydney Parrish for me. It ended up being 22 points for her. I think it was her. I don't think so. I know it was her season high. She hit that in the fourth quarter right before she got benched for all of the subs coming in. But I thought that Sydney just played a really good game. She was, 8 of 11 from the field. So I see what you're saying with Shea. She, got the ball to people with her 7 assists and stuff. But I just really thought that Sydney played both good defense and she was really, she was just really on. So we'll see if anyone in our chat mob can break the tie for us here between Sydney and Shea in that game. But we'll see how it goes. And like you said, maybe we'll just give them each a half as well and call it a wrap. But let's go ahead and talk about hardest worker. Who did you have for your Grace Berger hardest worker in that game?
Well, this is going to be for me. It's going to be the same. I was going to go Sid here because Sid had, just you said, the 22 points. She had a rebound. She had 2 assists. She had a steal, and she actually led the team at plus 31. So I was going to go with Sydney here for the hardest worker award.
Okay. Yes, I had the opposite. Same. I had Shea down for my hardest worker. So let's see. We got a couple votes for game ball for Sydney. So why don't we just go ahead and give our game ball to Sydney, and Shea will get our hardest worker award.
Okay.
Anything else on the Rutgers game before we move on?
No, I have nothing else about Rutgers.
No. Okay. Well, then let's go ahead and talk about Minnesota. So this was a road game for us that we ended up losing 66-56 in this game, Jeff. So why don't we go ahead and talk any of the numbers or just kind of the thoughts and flow of the game? What would you like to kind of start with?
Game was a third quarter. To me, the game really came down to the third quarter because we got outscored 21-14 in a game that you lost by 10. There's 7 of the 10-point margin. It's little things like that. And again, just the offense kind of dried up there in the third, especially at that second and third quarter. We only had 10 points in the second quarter. We had 14 points in the third quarter, which was a little bit better, but we were only down 2 at the half. And then defensively, we kind of fell off as well. So, but again, this was one of those games where Yarden disappeared. She only had 6 points. She ended up with 4 fouls. She had 2 turnovers. And she was minus 13. And again, that's not acceptable. You're on the road, chance to win the game. We were really never, we didn't get a big lead. I don't think we ever led in the fourth quarter, but it just, it was a winnable game, and we kind of let it just get away and lose it because we couldn't find offense from our best players.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sid struggled too.
Yeah, she really did. And, again, when you have some of your starters come out and you don't get, especially your leading scorer, and, as much as we praise Yarden, I think we got to give her some criticism here these last 2 games. And we'll get to the game tonight against Michigan, but it really started in this game against Minnesota. We've seen this from her at times where she has just kind of disappeared on us. But these last 2 games were just huge goose eggs from her. And And you just can't have that from your starting player on top of it. So, and the same thing. So you have Sydney Parrish and Yarden Garzone collectively go for 13 in this game. And that's just not a recipe that we can win with. We're just not a team built to have just one or two people all the time going off. You have to have two of your stronger players play really up to their potential and then some, but consistency. We just are not seeing that from this team this year, is the consistency. So, kind of, again, looking at some of the numbers and the comparisons we have, again, 38% shooting for us, 44% for Minnesota. On the positive side, I guess we did hold them to only 2 of 11 shooting from 3 for 18%. But on the other hand, we were only 7 of 22. So, again, just it was quite the opposite from what we got in the Rutgers game. It was not a good shooting night at all when we were up at Minnesota.
I'm going to go and hone in on free throws here, Kathy. In the Rutgers game, I did mean to touch on this. Again, we were shooting the ball so well, and we were hitting threes, especially. Only went to the line 8 times. At Minnesota, only went to the line 9 times. I'll talk about tonight because we didn't get there very often tonight either, except I think we finally did get in there a little bit more tonight. Yeah, because the fourth quarter especially. But in this game in Minnesota, not nearly aggressive enough. And Minnesota was 18 of 22 at the line. There's your game. Indiana was 7-9. They outscored us by 11 at the free throw line. And yeah, some people may say officiating and all that. I didn't think the officiating was all that bad in the Minnesota game. I really felt like they were the more aggressive team, and we didn't respond. And we were willing to settle for jump shots. And you talked about, Yarden and Sydney combined go 4 for 19, and that includes 2 for 10 beyond the arc. And they combined also to shoot only 4 free throws. So they got to do more in trying to get to the free throw line. And I'm not saying you have to go hunt contact, but I just get the feeling this team is not being aggressive enough.
Yeah, I agree. And another place that shows up, Jeff, is, again, rebounding. It was even in that win, a sound win of 21 points over Rutgers, we got out rebounded. It was awful in the Minnesota game. 43 rebounds to 25 rebounds for us. And you absolutely can't have it. And, I get that second chance points maybe didn't quite lead to it, but it was still a 7-point differential, 10 points for Minnesota, 3 for us. And it's a 10-point game. So right there already, you got a 7-point differential that you're giving up to Minnesota. And then you compound that with, some of our top players not showing up and scoring. It's just not a recipe that's going to work for you in any game, but especially one in the Big Ten on the road against a team that candidly has been playing a lot better than a lot of people thought Minnesota was going to be this year. And, we'll get into Big Ten standings later, but this was one that was very important in terms of Big Ten standings and what we're looking at in terms of our NCAA berth, hopefully getting one and not talking about a bubble, but they're getting really close to that discussion. And, again, we'll talk more big picture after we break down a little bit more of the Michigan game. But I agree. I think we just looked slow in a lot of the game here. The bright spot, I guess, here as well, I think Shea Chesky played fairly well. Like I mentioned, this was the game she got her 1,000th point. But again, she needs some help from Yarden, especially not disappearing on us. But any other overall thoughts on the Minnesota game?
Well, you go up to Minnesota and you only turned it over 6 times. That might have been the season low, for this team this is a team that's turned it over way too much at times, including tonight. We'll talk about it in a few minutes, but 6 turnovers. And you would think you go up there, only turn it over 6 times, win the points off turnover battle 18. If I thought you're coming out there with a win, but they didn't do enough other things other than scoring in transition to help themselves. So yeah, that's kind of the last thing I really got about the Minnesota game before we talk about the awards.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and go into it, Jeff. So I'll go first this time if you want, and then you can go first in the Michigan game. But for game ball, I went ahead and was going to give my vote here to Shea Chesky in this one. I thought, again, not just because she hit her 1,000th career point, because I've been pointing out before, this is not a career game ball, but a game ball for just this game. But I thought she played really well, and she tied for a lead in scoring with 12 points, along with Caroline Striplin. She only had 2 turnovers, and I get not many, but she also contributed 2 steals. She made both of her free throws, and she was 2 of 5 from 3-point. So, not gaudy numbers, but when your team as a total only puts up 56 points, and she put up 12 of those points for us, I went ahead and gave her my game ball. So that's who I voted for. But how about you? What is your thought?
We're going to need some help from the workaholics here because I'm going to go with Chloe. Chloe had 11 points, but she also included 5 rebounds, 5 assists, and a steal. So the points were almost similar. So Shay's 1 extra point, I didn't think outweighed the fact that Chloe had 4 more rebounds and 3 more assists. So I went with Chloe here for the game ball. We'll need some help for the Minnesota game ball from the workaholics.
Okay. Yep. So yes, I was going to talk about Chloe and the next one, which was our Grace Berger Hardest Worker Award. I was going to vote for Chloe in that one. So again, right, exactly to your point, the rebounding. But for me, I thought Chloe also just did a fantastic job on defense. But it looks like we're getting some votes in here already. So it's pretty resounding for Chloe for game ball. So we'll definitely give Chloe a game ball, but who did you have for your Grace Berger Hardest Worker?
Yeah, we'll do what we did last one. I was going with Shay here. So let's give the hardest worker to Shay because I think they were the only 2 really that kind of deserved any mention here. Striplin, unless, by the way, I will say this. Striplin had 12 points, but she didn't have a single rebound. Your starting 5 can't be zilch. Can't be zilch in rebounding. And then she also fouled out with 3 assists. So that's why I didn't have Caroline in here. With anything for game ball or hardest worker because she did nothing on the glass. So
yeah. The last person before we leave Minnesota game behind, and we'll talk a little bit more about her probably in the Michigan game, is Lily Meister. And you kind of mentioned her as well earlier in the show, but we really are seeing, I feel like she's struggling a lot in her game. This is one in particular I thought she really struggled. She played 11 minutes. She was 0 of 5 shooting, only 1 rebound for her as well. So between your 2 starting centers, you got 1 rebound between the 2 of them. So it just, I don't know, and again, we can wait and talk about this in a more big picture too, as well, if we want to touch on Lily some more. My wonder with Lily is, I know the coach, Coach Morin said when she took Lily out of the starting lineup, it was mainly because Lily needed to get out of Lily's way and she was too much in her head. And I feel like, and I think I texted this to you and Ari in our group chat, I almost feel like Lily's got the yips, and it showed up in this game where she missed some really easy shots that, she really should be making. And I almost wonder if there's something mental going on with her right now that's causing her to struggle so much in her game.
But I think,
go ahead.
I wasn't trying to interrupt you. I was just like, and in my view, and I get it. I wouldn't necessarily say Coach Morin did the wrong thing, but I think it made it worse. I think Lily's gotten more inside her head since she's gone to the bench than she was when she was, maybe struggling at times starting. So, and that happens because now all of a sudden you lose confidence, or not all of a sudden, but you've lost some confidence. You start overthinking everything. You start overanalyzing everything you do, including shooting a layup. And at least kind of what you talk about, you kind of get the yips and you can't make anything that ought to be point blank or do things. And so I think in this case, I hate to say mental because I don't want to make it sound like I know anything going on. But in my view, it's just Lily has gone from already kind of being inside her head, overthinking everything, to now she's super overthinking everything. So,
yeah,
excuse me. That's why I wanted to add about Lily.
Okay, cool. Well, let's wrap up our trifecta of games tonight with another road loss. I'll get there, I swear. Another road loss, and that was just earlier tonight. And this one was a much closer game. In fact, we led for like 24 minutes and 7 seconds of this game. It ended up losing this game 67-70. But go ahead, Jeff. Why don't we get started on what you want to talk about with the game tonight against Michigan?
One of the things let's go fourth quarter here. We were up going to the fourth quarter. We get outscored 31-21. We gave up 31 points in the fourth quarter. We get outscored by 10. There's your game. And and the frustrating part about that was for a veteran team to let that have happened. You had Striplin, you had Parrish, you had Garzone, you had to a certain degree Chesky all out there at the same time, Chloe out there, 5 people who are juniors or older who couldn't hold on to a lead on the road in a place that wasn't that hostile. There was only about 2,000 people. There was 2,600 people. So it wasn't that hostile.
That's right.
So
And playing against fairly young Michigan team as well.
And this is the one that you really felt like that got away, that you're going to look back at the end of the season going, man, that's one we should have had.
Yeah.
We gave it away, and it came down to the fourth quarter.
Yeah, and the Oregon game too. Yeah, I'm going to kind of hone in on that first half. We did not have Yarden take a shot at all in almost the entire first half. She took her first shot with 1:45 left in the half. It was a 3-pointer and she missed it. She didn't have a single point in that game, and she ended up with only 2 points overall. She only took 4 field goals. Now, on the positive side, she did have some nice passes, inbound passes, and she had 4 assists and 6 rebounds. But quite honestly, that wasn't going to cut it in this game. We absolutely needed way more than 2 points. I thought it was bad again, the Minnesota game, but I thought this game for Michigan against Michigan was one of the worst games I've seen Yarden play in the 3 years by far. She just didn't look comfortable. She didn't look like she was being aggressive, looking for her shot. And, we know that the game plan was to drive against Michigan. We saw that very clearly early on, especially with Lexi, right? In that first quarter, Lexi came in for Chloe after she got her 2 fouls. Very aggressive driving to the basket. And we saw that a couple times with Sydney driving to the basket and Chloe driving to the basket. But we never saw that aggressiveness from Yarden whenever she got the ball. But what other thoughts do you have either on Yarden's play or just if you want to talk about other things in this game?
I've already hit on Yarden. It's unacceptable. You're all league forward can't go and have 2 points in a game on the road. It just can't happen. But back to the fourth quarter, Michigan shoots 71%. Where's the defense that this team, this program is supposedly, built on? You don't allow somebody, especially a younger team, they're freshmen and sophomores. They shot 71% down the stretch. And that's the game. I mean, it really was. We were leading going to the fourth quarter and we couldn't get stops. They were 10 for 14. The one positive I'll point out here a little bit for IU is they actually out-rebounded somebody tonight. Indiana was plus 11 on the glass, 37-26, and they had 9 offensive boards. But they didn't do much with that on second chance points. They only won the second chance points 12-11. So a lot of things that were going well initially couldn't finish.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you mentioned, they outscored us by 10 in the fourth quarter. We let them score 31. In the previous 3 quarters, it was 15, 12, and 12. And then all of a sudden you let them balloon up to 31. And, as an example, Swords on their team, who is one of their leading scorers that normally averages 15 points, she ended up with 15 points. All in the second half and most of them in the last quarter. So all of a sudden you had a player that you had clamped down for almost 75% of the game. And then all of a sudden you let her get hot. It just like they lost focus in that fourth quarter on the defensive end, especially. And then it was compounded by the fact that we couldn't make a 3-pointer to save her life. We ended up shooting 3 of 16 and we had chances to win going down the stretch there, even though we let Michigan get back into it. We had chances to win, and you knew that we just weren't going to make the 3-pointer to tie it, as an example. I knew it. I think Shea Chusky maybe took the last 3-pointer that we ended up missing. And I just looked at my husband. I said, you just kind of knew as soon as that went off her hand, that was just not going to go in because it was not happening for us tonight. And unfortunately, that has generally been our calling card this year, right? Or just in general with Coach Moore and teams. Defense, tough-nosed defense, disappeared on us in the fourth quarter, and being able to shoot 3-pointers. And again, this is another game, and inconsistent. You go from Rutgers, where you almost set a record in how much you score in one quarter, to here you can't even get more than 67 points in a game. Right. Should we touch on turnovers, Jeff? You kind of mentioned that first. You want to talk about the turnovers in this game?
18 turnovers by IU led to 17 points for Michigan off turnovers. They won that battle 17-8. Again, can't help the other team.
No. So, it just kind of sounds like another broken record, and not in total, right? Because they have had some really great games, and we can't lose sight of that. The Baylor game and against Iowa, as an example, and even though they were losses against USC and UCLA, there have been some really good games. The problem with this team is that their floor, when they're not playing, their floor is just so much lower than we've kind of seen the last, 4 or 5 years from our Indiana squad. And I think it's just a hard adjustment for us to think about as fans. Yeah, we're just not where we have been historically. And went through some growing pains. I get that earlier in the year, but we're just, in this kind of roller coaster with this team this year. But any other specific stats or moments or thoughts on the Michigan game, or do you want to talk about game ball and hardest worker?
Let's move on to the awards, because I've hit the things I think were needed to be said, and that was all about the fourth quarter. I will say this real quick. Second quarter was kind of ugly. Looked a lot, got kind of stagnant toward the end of the quarter. Third quarter, again, without Caroline Striplin and Sydney Parrish in the second half, I'm not sure the offense would have looked any better because nobody else was doing much. But those two kind of put us on the back and got us back into it where we had a lead, a very solid lead. All we had to do was close it out. And that's the thing that's frustrating is you look back at the fourth quarter and it's like it was there for the taking. We just didn't take it.
That's right. Okay, so let's see. We should mention maybe as well here, shorter bench again. The interesting thing with our bench, our double-digit minutes this time came from Lexi again, but it came from Jules, who had 13 minutes rather. Lily in this game down to 7 minutes. Hannah only 5. So just a quick one, but let's talk game ball. Then we can talk about any of the other individual players as well during this segment. Jeff, I think this one might be a little easier.
This is the easiest one of the three. Caroline Striplin for 28 points on 12 of 19. She missed some bunnies herself. 4 of 7 at the free throw line, 7 rebounds, an assist, and 3 steals and a block shot. So Caroline Striplin gets my vote for the game ball.
Yep, I'm making it unanimous. That's a nice, easy one for us here. So, so Caroline Striplin will get our game ball. So now, before we move on, I'll just update all our numbers. So Yarden Garzone still leads game ball with 5, but she is now tied with Sydney Parrish, who also has 5. Shay Chesky and Chloe Moore McNeil both have 4. Caroline Striplin and then Lily Meister each have 3. All right, Jeff. Hardest worker. This one might be a little bit harder, but maybe not. But who do you have on this one?
This was, to me, it was easy. I think you could talk about Chloe here a little bit. You really talk about Lex here, but 6 turnovers by Lexi is going to take it away from me. You can't turn it over 6 times here. But Sid had 14 points, 5 rebounds. She didn't shoot it the greatest, but she was only 5 for 11. So she was just a little under 50%. It wasn't like she was shooting awful. And go back to Yarden. She only took 4 shots. What's that? Yarden should be hunting shots. And I don't get but Sid was 5 for 11. She was 3 of 3 at the line, 5 rebounds, an assist. And so I'm going to go with Sid here for the hardest worker, even though I do think you can make an argument for Lexi.
I do too. I think Lexi had a really great first half. In particular, she scored all 9 of her points in that first half. Unfortunately, she went 0-2 from the free throw line in 4 of 8 shooting. But I really liked her aggressiveness. She came in, like we mentioned, when Chloe had those 2 really fast fouls, with a minute 40 or something. She had 2 fouls almost back to back. So I think, the first half, I thought the same thing that you did. I thought Lexi played a great game. Chloe as well, but the fouling was a problem tonight. And again, you can blame it on officials if you want, but at least 4 of those fouls I thought were actually legitimate fouls. So nothing there. And we need our 5th-year senior point guard a little bit more on it. The good news is after those 2 fouls, she didn't get another one until sometime in the 3rd quarter. But to wrap this up, Sydney Parrish will also get my Graceberger Hardest Worker Award. So with that, Chloe Moore McNeil and Sydney Parrish both are tied for most hardest worker at 5. Yarden Garzone has 4. Shay Chesky, Caroline Striplin both have 3. Lily Meister has 2, and then Jules and Hannah Sandbeck each have 1. So Jeff, why don't we go ahead and move on? If you want, we can do a quick numbers watch. Not a whole lot of movement on these 3 games. Unfortunately, on the Yarden side, we're mainly watching her 3-pointers made. She didn't make a single 3-pointer tonight, in case you're wondering. That is now happened 3 times this year. But she is now up to 195 3-pointers made. So she's still in the same spot where we left her before, which is in 4th place. She's working towards that 200 mark, which will be her tied for 3rd. So why don't we go ahead and move on, Jeff, and talk about our upcoming game. So our next game will be at home this Saturday, the 15th, against our rival Purdue. It's another early tip-off at noon Eastern or 11 Central. That game will be on Big Ten Network. In terms of history, Purdue, if you know anything about in women's basketball history, Purdue used to be a pretty strong powerhouse in basketball. And so in terms of history, IU trails 53-42. However, that is flipped here in recent years as well. If you follow along, you'll know that we have now won 11 in a row. They are coached by Katie Geralds, who is in her 4th season at Purdue. She is a former Purdue player. She is 59-60 now at Purdue, which is under 500. And under her in those 4 years, they have 1 NCAA appearance. Jeff, you want to talk about a couple of their players?
Yeah, they won tonight, by the way, against Northwestern, 75-60. So she's actually 60-60 now overall at Purdue. Okay. So, but still, so just a 500 coach, exactly. So, but this is an interesting Purdue team. They have struggled to score as a team all year. They're led by Destiny Lombardi, 5'9" senior guard. She's only averaging 10.7 a game. 3.3 rebounds, 2.2 assists. She shoots 47% from the field, 41% from three, and 73% at the line. But again, for a Power 5 team, your leading scorer is barely above 10 points a game. It's very unusual. Their second leading player, I guess I'll throw in here, is Reagan Bass, 6'2" senior forward, just under 9 a game, just over 5 rebounds, 39% field goal, 77% at the free throw line. But there's not a lot of star power right now with this group with the Boilermakers, and it's showing up in their record. They're 9-15 now. After tonight, they're 9-15 overall, 2-11 in the conference. And on paper, this is a game we should win. But I'm going to say it right now, this really is becoming a must-win game. You can't afford to lose this game to Purdue in terms of the overall NCAA tournament picture, because this would be probably a quad 3, quad 4 type loss if you lose to Purdue at home. And this is kind of a get-right game. You got to get back home, get the energy of the crowd, get back to playing the way you want to play. But this is a big game coming up Saturday, not just because it's a rivalry game, but in terms of where you want to be in seeding in the Big Ten tournament, where you want to be in the NCAA tournament. You can't afford to stub your toe here.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, you touched on the players. I'll just quickly touch a little bit on their team numbers. So offensively, they're only averaging 63 points per game. That's 206th in the nation. They're giving up 74 points per game, 336th in the nation. They only shoot 42% from the field, which is 123rd, and a 47% effective field goal percentage. 3-pointers, also not a strong suit, 31.9% for their average there at 151st. They are getting out-rebounded by 2.6 on average per game, and they are also turning it over more than their opponents at a clip of 4.5 turnovers per game. So, yeah, I agree with you, Jeff. This is, again, you're back home. You just are coming off the road, with 2 losses. You got to right the ship here. You cannot lose to, candidly, a really bad Purdue team. You just can't, especially at home. This would be a very bad loss for going again to a team that in Purdue is fighting to try to make it into the Big Ten tournament. There is a lot riding on this game in terms of, like you mentioned, seeding and pride. And it's a rivalry game, so you just can't take it for granted. So they have to come home, have a couple, good walkthroughs, get some film, talk about what's going on. Hopefully Yarden can get some rest and figure out what's, kind of going on with her and right her ship in particular. But those are kind of the things I'm looking for. I don't have anything specifically. I just want us to come out with fire and play, again, a full 40 minutes from tip-off into the final buzzer and really just take it to Purdue and hopefully get a couple double-digit win here and help us move up a little bit in those standings. So anything else on on the Purdue, or you want to talk Big Ten?
Nah, let's just move on and talk about the Big Ten a little bit.
Okay. All right. Go ahead. You go first.
Yeah, I just kind of go back over since we haven't been on for a while. The big game kind of that went through here is go back UCLA at Pauley Pavilion, a 65-52 win over Ohio State. That was a top 10 matchup. Michigan had beaten Nebraska 78-50. Then OSU goes crosstown over to USC, lost 84-63. Again, top 10 matchup. So they went 0 for 2 on the LA swing. And then this past Sunday, Michigan goes into East Lansing and beats Michigan State 71-61. UCLA went on the road to beat Oregon 62-52. And then I thought a little bit of a surprise here on Monday night, just 2 nights ago, Iowa goes into Lincoln and beats Nebraska by 15, 81-66. And then so the other game that's going on right now is Washington and Oregon is there. But I think their big game, obviously, we're all watching for tomorrow night in terms of just in pure entertainment value for me is UCLA, USC at USC tomorrow night, and obviously a top 10 matchup and what really could end up being the Big Ten crown. I think any hope USC has, they have to win because I don't think UCLA is going to lose twice in the league. And so USC has that one loss already. And so I think it's one of those where, you've got to, USC's path to the title has got to win tomorrow night.
Yep, absolutely. So in terms of Big Ten standings now, leading the pack still is undefeated UCLA. They are undefeated both in the regular season and Big Ten. So they are 11-0. USC is still in second place with that one loss to Iowa at 11-1. Even with those 2 losses, Ohio State is still in third place at 9-3. Right behind them, though, in a 3-way tie for 4th place, you have Illinois, Maryland, and Michigan State all at 9-4. In 7th place, Michigan at 9-5. And then now you have a 4-way tie with us for 8th place between Indiana, Oregon, Iowa, and Nebraska. Oh, excuse me, I missed. And Minnesota. So we have a 5-way tie at 7-6. So back to what we were saying, Jeff, like this Purdue game, you cannot lose to them for a number of reasons. Number 1, it's a bad Purdue team. Number 2, it's Purdue. Number 3, it's Purdue. And number 4, like 5, 6, 7, and 8, whatever you want to pick them, we are in a really tight race here, and the implications of anything going down the stretch here are really huge on the Big Ten standings and the bubble watch and or seeding in the NCAA tournament.
Yep, I agree.
So Jeff, I thought we'd skip the net rankings tonight unless you really want to hit anything there. Otherwise, we'll just hit our final thoughts.
I didn't update them, so
me neither. All right, then.
You got to shake them off. You got to get better. You got to find a way to forget about these 2 losses, even though they should gnaw at you a little bit, but you can't have a hangover. Like you said, and we said already, you have to be ready for Purdue on Saturday. That becomes really a must win after dropping these 2 on the road. No real harm in losing on the road per se. It's the way they lost that I think is really gnawing at us. And we compare the way we played against Rutgers and some other teams. Get right game on Saturday with Purdue. Go from there. Again, stay ahead of the Big Ten standings here a little bit. What I mean by that, we're 7-6. Beat Purdue, you're 8-6. You only got 4 games left in the league then, because you're only playing 18 games in the league. So you got 4 games left. At least 2 of those are going to be on the road, if not 3. So you got, you're going to have to make some hay here, and you still got Ohio State and Maryland as part of that. So in a second game with Purdue, that's definitely going to be on the road. So you got to make some. You got to get a win here in order to stay where you want to be in the standings.
Yeah, absolutely. And we only got 5 games left, Jeff. So 2 of them are against Purdue. Those on paper, again, look like they are winnable games. But in between the Purdue sandwich, the meat of the Purdue sandwich, we have Ohio State, who obviously we just talked about. They're number 9 in the country right now. Michigan State, ranked number 22. That's going to be on the road. And then back home again against number 17, Maryland.
Yep.
You really, let a couple games here slip away. You had that Oregon game that we had a chance to win. You had this game tonight that was right there within our grasp. You got to make sure you hold serve against Purdue and try to steal one of those 3 games in the middle, to help bolster your NCAA resume for sure, as well as your Big Ten tournament seed. So, let's just do it. Let's flush these games down the toilet, after we do our analysis as a team and hopefully learn something from them to correct. So, and then beat Purdue on Saturday, and we'll be back here with you guys. All right. So coming up next for Jeff and I, as I just alluded to, we will be returning on Saturday on February the 15th. We will be recapping the Purdue game immediately following that game. Just as a reminder, that tips off at noon Eastern, or for Jeff and I, 11 a.m. Central. So, around a couple hours after that game, probably we'll be right here with you all to talk about hopefully a double-digit beat Purdue day win for us to talk about. But if you would like to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat, please make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find us at youtube.com/@BackHomeNetwork. You can also be part of our private community as well. Find out more at assemblycall.substack.com. A special thanks to John Ringer of Riggs Design for designing our logos. A big thank you to Bob Thompson for the music you heard throughout the broadcast. But most of all, thank you for listening, whether you're here live and in the chat. We've been very active tonight in the chat, so hopefully you can join us live. Appreciate everyone being here. Or if you're listening after the fact, we love you guys too. But we will be back to talk with you IU Hoops again on Saturday. But until then, keep your elbow in, your eyes on the rim, and let's go Hoosiers. All right. Well, thanks. I should also mention I did get to meet a couple of our listeners, a longtime listener, Tony, out there, and then some of our other faithful listeners. I got to see them at the meetup back in Bloomington on Saturday. That was one of the reasons we didn't do a game on our show on Sunday. I was then visiting my mom and sister and brother-in-law. So no offense, but I opted for them over our podcast. But it was a nice weekend back in Bloomington, even though the men lost that game as well. But it was really nice to see everybody that was able to come out to upstairs. So hopefully next year we'll have a nice showing there as well. So thanks for everyone who came out and introduced themselves, and thank you all for listening to us. I really do appreciate it.
Glad everybody could make it. So, hey, Kathy, let's get out of here.
Yep.
It's been a fun night.
Let's do it. All right. Good night, everyone. Talk to you Saturday.